right, thank you. Like Beck said, I am Seth Miller. I'm the editor of PaxX.aero. I write a lot about in-flight internet service and entertainment systems. Sometimes I hang out in an overhead bin. Listen, if you got that shot, you would use it for everything too. That's all I'm saying. Don't be jealous. We are going to talk about a lot of different stuff related to connectivity today. Do we have enough? Is it good enough? I think the answers to those are both no, and so maybe my panel will disagree with me. We'll start with a fight, and then how we're going to make it all better for the future. And we got 45 minutes to solve that problem. And the good news is I got a good team to do it. So quick introductions of yourself, Alex. Start from that end, and then we'll get going.
How you doing, everybody? My name is Alex Polito. I'm responsible for business development for Eutelsat OneWeb, and very excited to be here.
Yep, thank you so much, Seth, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vishal Patel. I'm a senior consultant at NovaSpace. So those who don't know, NovaSpace is the leading business consulting company based out of Paris, having global presence. And we are basically helping entire space industry solving their business problems, basically. And we are single largest privately owned independent company into an aerospace industry since last 40 years. And my role within the company, it evolves around IFC and mobility SATCOM. And I'm happy to be here.
Good afternoon. My name's Mark Dickinson. I'm the CTO at Neo Space Group. You might not know who Neo Space Group are. It was only been founded just a year ago by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, the PIF, as the Saudi National Space Champion. So I joined a couple of months ago, and prior to that, I spent 25 years at Inmarsat and Viasat. I'm the CTO, I should say, so I forgot to mention that. And looking at all sort of space segment-related stuff, getting satellites launched and stuff.
Great, thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. I'm Martin Connerson, the Sales and Business Development Director for Airfi.aero. We are a Dutch-based company in the in-flight entertainment, connectivity, and onboard payments market. We have been in the business for around 15 years, and we, back in the day, invented the portable wireless IFE system, which has become a mainstay of the industry, and we're here to try and do the same again for in-flight connectivity and convince you that you don't need to go and put a hole in your aircraft if you want to get connected.
And that's a good segue into the question that I promised I'd ask when we introduced this session is there enough bandwidth? Do we have enough bandwidth on the planes? Is there enough bandwidth in the skies? Is it just a function of cost? Where are we at right now?
Great start.
Fight with each other. Don't talk to me.
Because I'm going to disagree with my colleagues, probably. I'd say, do you need to have this race for high bandwidth and high-speed internet? We're obviously in the Iridium LEO connectivity end of the market, so our solution is very much around getting data on and off the aircraft. So that data might manifest itself as in-flight messaging. It might manifest itself as being able to get connected for your onboard payments. So you've got online payment connectivity, the same as you'd have on ground, which, trust me, is going to eliminate a lot of fraud. So I would challenge whether or not you really need to get that. Becky said at the start, we all want to have the same experience in the aircraft as we do on the ground, but a lot of the research will tell you that people love being disconnected in an aircraft, and actually bringing in connectivity might bring with it a load of challenges as well. We operate in the in-flight entertainment streaming market, so if you want to stream movies, we've got that covered. If you want to get connected, we've got that covered too. So I do challenge the industry to think, do they get the return on investment from just chasing into this high bandwidth marketplace? So perhaps there's alternatives to just high bandwidth.
Maybe just add a comment. So you're right that people will pay the most amount of money for the first bit compared to the billionth bit. So not all bits are the same. Okay. But I would say that what we've seen over the last 5 years is certainly a trend towards higher bandwidth packages, people usage patterns changing on aircraft to be far more, okay, I want to stream my own content, I want to do my more media-rich type of activities. So I think bandwidth is important. Do we have enough for the future? A lot of that comes down to spectrum. There's more and more systems being deployed that have to coexist. Many KU systems, OneWeb, Starlink, existing GEO, KA, you've got Kuiper coming, Telesat, 1,000 sales from China. There's a lot of capacity, a lot of satellites going to orbit, and actually managing those satellites in a coordinated way is quite challenging. There's only a finite amount of spectrum. There are certain limits around power levels from spacecraft, which may be revised in the years to come, but there are current limitations to protect the GEO spacecraft. So I think one of the things we may see over the next 5 to 10 years is an addition of new bands, higher frequency bands, Q and V band, for example. The issue that's been with these high frequency bands previously is atmospherics. And the beauty thing about aviation is you fly high above the weather. So it's a great use case for using Q and V band. And the user terminals are nice and small. So I think we'll see definitely demand of bandwidth increase. And we'll see the KU and KA systems having to coexist in more intelligent ways. But in the long term, I think we'll also see additional new bands coming to market as the technology gets to a price point which means it's feasible and affordable.
Interesting. And also, like, if you look at purely market dynamics point of view, what we have seen in the market is, and obviously if you roam around, if you speak to suppliers, you will also see that there is a market which is going towards multi-orbit. So I think, as my co-panelist said, there will be new frequencies that those will be explored in the long-term future. But I think from short to medium-term future, probably we see more of NGSO playing important role in overall IFC. But at the same time, whether there will be only solutions that people will be looking at, probably not. There will be coexistence of GEO, MEO, LEO hybrid solutions at the same time. And I think the main focus will be to extract best of both worlds. And that is to the benefit of airlines and for the passengers, because passengers today, they want to remain connected, have consistent performance as they're used to at home, and probably that is what they're looking at today. To answer your question, whether the capacity is there, if you're looking at geo perspective, maybe it's limited, but with NGSO and like upcoming constellations, new constellations, I believe there will be massive amount of capacity available. And will demand be able to catch up with that supply? It's a good question. Maybe not immediately, but yeah, this is something that we will look forward to.
I think you're the first person I've ever heard say, will demand catch up with supply when talking about satellites. So we're going to come back to that. But Alex, you guys have a LEO and a GEO.
We do. We have both, and we love our LEO, but we also subscribe to a multi-orbit proposition for a number of reasons, not strictly just capacity being one of them. I think, really, to answer your original question, what we're seeing right now is the market is converging around the definition of what good is, and from that definition, from that understanding of the QoS and QoE required to provide a satisfactory or above satisfactory Wi-Fi decision, you're going to begin to see the requirements for bandwidth and capacity backed out of that. And this process started really, I think, with the switch from terrestrial-based networks to more satellite-based GEOs, and now with LEOs coming in the mix, and one day maybe even MEOs. But it's really answering what is required to provide the best user experience that we can to differentiate, so customers can differentiate themselves. And then from there, you have to understand, I think, that use cases are always going to come up. There's always new technology. The demand for connectivity, I think, is more of a parabolic shape than it is an S-curve. And so I guess I would strongly advocate that we need to understand what good is first. And once we do that, I think we can start to, or rather continue to refine around what is needed from a supply perspective.
I just want to make sure I heard you say you were seeing demand come back down.
No. I think it's going to be going up.
I thought I heard you say, as we're settling on what good is, the number's coming down. I'm glad I clarified.
No, you're going to establish what good is, and then I think once we have that established, all of the natural use cases that are growing and propagating on aircraft today are going to continue to drive those to a higher level of.
Yeah. As we start thinking about the business model around connectivity. Original solution was, the original solution was connection, which was absurdly expensive, and then GoGo, which was air to ground and absurdly expensive, and then various satellite solutions, which one of them was free, but they mostly were absurdly expensive to the consumer. We're getting to the point now where free is a thing, and I think we would tend to agree that even just $1, that friction of having to pay creates a problem, and you see take rate tail off dramatically.
Yep.
And so as we're seeing free become more of a thing, whether it's just free messaging or full free or whatever, how is that changing? Does that change these metrics, or is that baked into your expectations at this point?
Free has been on the horizon for some time now, and I think we're finally seeing it propagate through the market, and it's doing so at different speeds in different regions. I think the way I personally look at free, and I think you kind of touched on this, is more of it's almost a feature or a quasi-quality of experience part, in that the reason why you enjoy the Wi-Fi that you do have at home is because you have to pay for it, but you don't have to pay for that session in that moment. You pay your monthly bill, but you don't necessarily pay every time you use it, and so that yields you with a certain satisfaction initially, and we're seeing, I think, that recognized in the market. As for what it does to cost, I think scale helps for costs as these networks grow larger and larger. I think free, a multi-orbit solution in providing the required connectivity in the way that it needs to provide to support the level of QoE is extremely important, and also helps with scale.
Yeah. I think free is a bit of a misnomer. I have a little bit of a challenge on this one. It's free in the customer's hands because no one will pay for it. It's definitely not free in the airline's hands. You're talking about multi-million-dollar investment in aircraft. I get it in line fit. I think that's, you can understand that if you're going to pay a very large sum, 80 to hundreds of millions for an aircraft, then add in your in-flight connectivity system at line fit. I get that. How many retrofit aircraft out there without connectivity? 20,000, maybe 15,000. Certainly in the narrow body sector, there's a lot. Dominant amount of aircraft don't have connectivity. And I think for a low-cost carrier, for argument's sake, that's running that kind of fleet, and to say, hey, this is free for the customer, it's still a big expense for that airline. And it's an even bigger expense when you have to put a hole in your aircraft. I don't know if I mentioned that. We don't put holes in aircraft. So you have to put a hole in the aircraft. You have to wait 2 or 3 days to get it cured. You have to then drag that thing around. It's a huge antenna. I think the weight of the antennas, or the drag on the antenna, has roughly the same fuel burn as the winglet saved you, so that's gone back in the pot. So there's a lot of cost, and let's not get into maintenance and all that other stuff. I get it, high-speed internet is cheap on a data rate, but it's certainly very, very expensive to get on that list and on that rank in the first place. So I don't think connectivity is at all democratized in our industry. And I think if you can afford it and you've got line-fit aircraft coming through, then happy days, yeah? You can have a free offer. I'm also quietly vexed about a London School of Economics report I go back to time and again from 2016 or 17, which was written by Inmarsat, that are no longer in the market, but obviously trading under a different name. And in that, we were told that the airline market would make 40 billion per year in selling connectivity to customers. So within a short space of 6 or 7 years, we've gone from telling the airline industry you're going to make 20 billion out of selling tickets to get online, so you're going to make nothing but give away for free. So I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I don't think it's free. I think it costs. And I think what the airlines have been told to expect now is that you've got to just consider that as a sunk cost. You've got to put fuel in your aircraft. You've got to put fuel in your aircraft. You've got to put Wi-Fi on your plane. And therefore, that cost is going to come through somehow, manifest itself in ticket prices or whatever. So I think it's really fair and a good opportunity for us all to not just focus on how fast we can get, but also how can we make this affordable, and how can we make everybody that's flying on an aircraft get access to connectivity, because it shouldn't be that it's only the most wealthy airlines that can afford it. And let's be honest, our industry operates on around 5% margins. So we're doing a lot of heavy lifting to give away another massive product for free.
Yeah, an NGSO
The soapbox.
an NGSO constellation is going to cost you between $5 to $10 billion to deploy with a 5 to 7 year lifetime. So someone's going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So free is just the marketing side of it, or how you interact with the customer. So a number of years ago, with a previous hat on, we ran some trials. We took some airlines with a paid service and then switched it next week to a free service to see what the usage patterns was like and how it changed, what people's user experience was, with people, would the demand suddenly jump up? And it was some really interesting results because we talked about is there enough capacity. The IFC market is really hard because planes congregate at airports. Airlines congregate at hub airports. They take off at certain times. They fly in certain directions. This demand is not uniform distributed both in geography or time. So you have clumps of very high demand and huge regions of no demand. And if you then put on top of that usage profiles with different carriers, you have different commercial plans, you need to model all that to make sure that you have enough demand, not globally, but where the aircraft are. So the question is there not enough sort of supply? Do you have enough supply where you need to match the demand? And that supply-demand balance is fundamentally important. And having the flexibility in the network to be able to move capacity around, and that's, okay, we all love NGSO systems, are great, but one of the disadvantages is the capacity is spread evenly around the world, and if there's only a limited amount of capacity you can put into a certain geography.
Yeah.
GEOs have the ability to see 8 hours time zones, essentially, and with new flexible capacity, move that capacity around to meet that hub airport at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, when everyone's fleet is taking off to go. That's the challenge for IFC, which is unlike any other market. Maritime isn't like it. Maritimes are spread across the maritime routes and they don't change. Enterprise is fairly static, but the IFC brings particular challenges on that supply and demand side.
And for maritime, they have ports, hubs, but they can switch to cellular at that point, which aircraft, I guess, theoretically could do, but are not typically installed for. To your point about the broad coverage or the equal coverage, there's the old line of fish don't pay. The fish are much less likely to pay even than humans on planes, so it's very hard to get your investment back out on the ocean. You did mention you got into a little bit there, the sort of difference between the coverage type for a LEO constellation versus GEO and how that comes together. We started with GEO. For the most part, Iridium has been a LEO network since day one. We're now in this multi-orbit environment. The first 130 planes are flying on sharing the OneWeb network at this point. We've got Hughes Fusion coming to Delta later this year. So there are some of those things happening. Clearly, that is a direction we're moving. Is it going to stay multi-orbit? Is this a transition to NGSO only, or LEO only? Where do we think the market's headed here?
My perspective is I think multi-orbit at this point, for the fact that it seeks to remedy the supply and demand mismatch. That was, I think you were making the point, where you have clumpy demand in areas of hub congestion, and this helps relieve that. There's also, we always talk about, supply and demand when it comes to multi-orbit solutions. There's plenty of other benefits outside of that. I mean, it's unfortunate, but high sigma events do happen in this industry, and when they do, if you don't have a geo backbone, you're potentially in a position where you're not able to offer the connectivity that you've promised, to your market. And so this protects you against that, and so I think that's really, really relevant. The other point is the actual capabilities of the satellite, in terms of using smart tools, and I won't say AI, but smart capabilities to move demand around and use demand in different areas are starting to propagate in the market, and I think you're starting to see those, or you will see those come alive in, for example, our next gen architecture, which is going to help further alleviate some of those clumpiness, I guess, of the supply and demand. So I think we're pretty firm in our position that multi-orbit's here. You're investing in a line of technology that, when the inevitable happens with, MEOs, you've already developed a lot of the, logic and switching development, switching logic that it's required to babysit that network. So I think it's definitely multi-orbit.
Vishal, what's your research say?
So if you look at current situation about the IFC, LEO is essentially is the new thing, and it is going to provide a lot of capacity, low latency, and they have their own benefits. But at the same time, they also have some barriers. They have some limitations. So why we see there is a market drift towards a hybrid solution is mainly because want to provide something to the airlines, to the passengers, which is future-proof, which is foolproof solution, has redundancy. So if there is some regulatory hurdles for certain geographic areas that can be overcome by geo layer at that time, over that particular region. So I think that is going to stay for like foreseeable future. For me, main question is going to be like a multi-orbit, or is going to be LEO hybrid solution. Is it possible to have that sort of solution on an aircraft? This is something that we are looking at because GEO LEO is already there, or MEO GEO is already there. We are already seeing contracts being signed, aircraft being operated on such sort of solutions, but nobody is still talking about LEO solution. So I think that is something which could be interesting to see whether it is enough to have 2 LEO solutions and have consistent coverage and consistent QoE over like entire globe. I think that is something that we should be looking forward to.
And Mark, as a satellite operator, you're in GEO, but in the in-flight connectivity business, you work with the SES Open Orbits community platform thing, whatever we call that, which has access to MEO. So you can deliver a multi-orbit solution today. So, I mean, do you see this as, I would expect that you're going to keep GEO in service because of who your owner is and what the goal is there. But from an IFC perspective, is it going to be multi-orbit? Are you going to stay multi-orbit forever?
Yeah, I think so. I would add probably an NGSO network to that in the future.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that. I think it creates a robust solution. You can serve the particular needs of a particular customer through whichever network's most efficient. But the economics, I still come back. LEO is hot.
There's your reason why not, by the way. It's $5 to $10 billion. You said it earlier.
Yeah, but the economics are tough.
Yeah.
Starlink, they have done amazing. And what they've achieved in the last years is incredible. But they have a lot of money from other sources. Essentially, they don't work to the same economics as normal companies do. Kuiper will have the backing of the bigger Amazon family and AWS. Eutelsat, OneWeb will have Iris Squared in the future. Telesat have Canadian government. There's always some other source of funding to make the economics work. A standalone LEO system from a purely commercial basis doesn't make a huge amount of sense.
Unless you buy from us, obviously. But that would be a different
fair point.
When Airfi launches your own satellites, let me know, buddy. I'll come to the party.
But having a combination...
We've got a rocket on our stand, have you seen?
But having the ability to overlay capacity from multiple networks and the point about how you manage these networks is so important. We joke that we have to mention AI in any panel, on any conference you go to these days. But the capabilities of something like a language model is really applicable to the problems of capacity and supply and demand, and making predictions about where things need to change in the future. So I think there's a real need, there will be an element of machine learning, AI, in these future network management systems. But purely on a LEO system, which system doesn't get used? Who doesn't get the money? How does that work commercially? It's a difficult trade. Are you going to say you're going to be the backup to someone else? Does that work? I'm not sure how commercially that will...
How does that work in LEO GEO? Who's going to be the backup, right? I mean, this is one of the challenges for the industry of, certainly if you are a sole provider, if, that Hughes, who can manage both of them, you guys with the open orbits, you can, if you don't really sell direct, so that's not quite there, but right, you get to make that decision of what that cost is. And actually one of my questions here is a good segue is, do we have the tools to manage that routing from the aircraft and sort of monitor the traffic, figure out what needs to go where, figure out what those costs are and properly understand them, monitor them, measure them, all of those things, and actually do the routing? And I'm going to say it's machine learning, not AI, because it is the 2025, and I'm legally obligated to say I at one point, but that's the end.
I think my perspective is this. The last thing you want is for your customers, the airlines, or whoever they might be, to become brackish with the service and start to disassociate. I think really if you understand at a application level what type of traffic is required to deliver, and I keep using quality of experience, QoE, the QoE that meets the airline requirement or any requirement, it will become abundantly clear what you leverage through LEO and what you leverage through GEO. Once you understand that, the actual technology to do that, I mean, these UTs are developing iteratively very quickly, and I would, it's not appropriate necessarily for me to speak on the specific capabilities of that. I would urge you to speak with our partners, but I think we're going to see very soon that the actual, logic behind that management is becoming quite potent, and, it's going to be, I think, a very normal experience to be quickly switching between the two.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that, you don't want the airlines to disassociate the service from you as a provider, but I hate to say this, but should the airline care? Shouldn't the airline just want the service quality, the QoE at the price point?
Absolutely. I think.
Sucks to be you.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, you're a reseller, so maybe not as much, but yeah, I mean, at what level do we say, yes, an airline should have 2 terminals on board, or a network agnostic terminal that can connect to multiple different constellations, and it's it's like cell phone roaming. I mean, typically you stay on one network,
right?
But I am a U.S. subscriber here in Germany, and so I will be on the Vodafone or the Telcom or whatever, depending on, quite frankly, when I turn off airplane mode, whichever one it finds first, because they have contracts with everybody, right? So, or they have a pricing contract in play, and they know to try Vodafone first and then T-Mobile if it fails. And so, are we going to see that level of advanced sort of data flow and management in the market for Aero?
I think to a certain degree you already are seeing that, and I think, again, as the terminals continue to develop in logic, it's going to enable the ability to control that in, I think, a more, I hate to use contractual way, but in a more way that I think is defined and well-defined, either by or with the airline. I mean, who's to say really where the road goes, but I think at the very least, it's clear that type of technology is going to be extremely important while we manage these networks.
Maybe just one comment on the terminal side. The physics you need to connect to a LEO is fundamentally different from a GEO. And you can design an antenna for one and the other, and it can work with both, but it's not going to be optimized for both. And there's the panacea of this antenna that's going to come along that's going to be perfect for every orbital domain, that's been promised for years, and I don't see it around the corner. So maybe a 2-antenna solution is the right solution, and if it doesn't impact the airline too much, if the drag, the mass, the maintenance aspect is all manageable, then maybe that's the best way to achieve a certain solution. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see this lovely flat panel antenna that works well across GEO and can work a LEO with low elevation angles and can do multiple handoffs between spacecraft. But it's not there today. There's some very nice antenna solutions out there, but not this panacea of this all-perfect antenna.
The good news in this industry is that the perfect antenna is just 2 years away, and it has been for the last 15 years. So as long as you keep waiting that 2 years, you'll be fine. I got a bunch more questions here, but anyone out there have anything that they want to grill these folks on, talking about the experience or where we're at, what's going on? All right. I will keep going. Flag me down if you come up with something while we're still talking here. Either Becky or I will bring you a microphone. Let's talk about the next generation of satellites. And we talked a little bit about maybe new frequency bands. Are we still going to see GEOs launching? Are they going to be different than the GEOs of today/yesteryear? Are we going to see them, multiple frequency bands, things like that? What do you guys think the next generation of satellite looks like?
So I can
You're
never go
going to be the
first.
ones, you guys are the ones who are going to buy them, but you might know what people want with them.
So back in Inmarsat, I led the procurement for the first of the software-defined spacecraft, which is still yet to materialize. The fundamentals of the rationale behind those spacecraft are sound in terms of the economics it can deliver, especially for the aviation market. They were designed for the aviation, exactly as I said before, this moving around of demand and hotspots. That's exactly what they're designed for. Those satellites will eventually come to market. I think in 2 years' time, you'll see the first ones being launched. And I think GEO will have a bit of a renaissance. It's not going to be like it was before, but we're seeing the orders tick back up for 2 reasons. One is this technology is finally maturing. We're seeing sovereign needs. If you're a small country or small region, you don't build your own LEO system because only 2% of your spacecraft are ever visible over where you want the service. A GEO provides that in a far more cost-effective way. And what we might see is the advent of more smaller tactical GEOs, being able to overlay capacity maybe for certain hub airports. If you're over the US, for example, you can put some hotspots from multiple spacecraft over Chicago, New York, Atlanta, and then from a different orbital slot, do it from stack this capacity up. You can't do that from LEO. You're limited from a regulatory perspective how much spectrum you can put down into any geography, no matter how big your constellation is. So I see a renaissance in GEO. The orders are picking up again this year. You've seen, I think Thales have done very well this year already on orders. So yeah, it had a really big dip. I think as this technology is now going to come to market and be more, not just paper satellites, but real satellites, I think we'll see demand pick up.
Probably, yeah. I will speak from purely market perspective because what we have seen in last at least couple of years to let's say 5 years is if you look at how many GEO satellites ordered, it's very less. We have seen a significant drop, and as my colleague said, it's the small GEO market which is kind of like taking a like growing because of the same reason. You have like really concentrated capacity over certain areas, so that is well served with this kind of like satellites. They are cost efficient, they are easy, faster to build, easy to launch. So we certainly seen an uptake there. But honestly, if you are looking at like 6-ton big GEO bird, I mean, it's really there is no order placed in last few years. We have seen some quite recently, but whether there is a market, maybe replacement, yes, but for the new capacity, it's a good question. Yeah.
What satellites are you guys going to buy?
Yeah, so speaking from a LEO perspective, which is really where I think I'm most educated compared to what I know about GEOs, which is very little these days. I think really we're focusing on addressing the even supply, uneven demand issue. And we're doing that with the capabilities of the satellites to help direct capacity where we need that in our upcoming next generation satellites. But you almost have to consider like the orbital mechanics and the orbital planes associated with how you develop these networks, because there are so many satellites in the networks that the actual way they rotate around the Earth becomes very important into how you're delivering that capacity. So it's easy to get soaked up into, well, what is the satellite going to be individually capable of? It's really also, what is the network? How is it going to be shaped around, the globe to deliver what you need to deliver? The other thing we have is, using smarter technology to anticipate real-time, I think, demand situations as well as maybe QoS situations that are happening in real time through regenerative payloads and other very cool capabilities to help control the satellites in a more efficient way that deliver a much better level of QoS and ultimately QoE to the customer base.
Hey, for my 2 pennies, not being the satellite guy here, I think it's great that we've got all these new options, but it sounds to me like it's more options that are a bit out of my grasp, which is why we've got this perpetual, it's only ever 2 years away. I mean, I would invite the whole industry to start looking at other ways of being able to get airlines connected to this. And obviously the thing we've been breaking the cycle of is not having to go through an STC process. So the more and more that there is out there that we can achieve or wish to get onto, it'd be great if there was better ways to actually connect my aircraft without having to go through a big C check, without having to go through a big installation process. So perhaps the antenna technology doesn't have to be about radomes on top, could be improving the technology that we can put in windows, improving the way that transceivers can be operated rather than being plugged into aircraft power and a heavy install. It could be much more on our kind of fast fit model.
STC programs are fun.
Hey?
So STC programs are fun.
STC, bro, Billy Boots on that, my friend.
You need to get out more, man.
I've run too many of them, unfortunately.
You collect STC.
If that's fun, we got to talk. Tom Berg, we can have some actual fun here.
Yeah.
Getting all these satellites working means getting them off the ground, and they are very heavy, and space is a long way away. So the launch market is also part of what this future is. And these days seems to also come with some interesting geopolitical challenges at many levels. So,
Will we see aircraft getting set on fire if they operate Starlink?
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just a stretch on from the Tesla fires, isn't it?
So, but what do you guys think about the launch market? Are we going to see sufficient diversity of options? Is that it certainly is concentrated? Is that going to continue? You know, which way does that funnel move? Which way does that graph move over the next 5 years?
I can start on that. So obviously the market has been dominated by one player, SpaceX, with Falcon 9 in particular for the last 5 years or so. Amazing reliability, amazing cadence of launches. I think almost every satellite operator has used SpaceX to be able to get their assets up at some point. The rest of the launch vehicles, especially on the commercial side, now Russia is off the table, has taken many years to come to market. So we've seen Ariane 6 have their first couple of launches. We've seen Vulcan with ULA just come along and do their first launches. We've seen Mitsubishi Heavy Industries doing the first couple of their launches. And we're seeing New Glenn coming along with the first of their launch. But the history tells us these launches, actually the cadence of launch takes quite a few years to ramp up to something sort of more than 1 or 2 a year, or maybe 4 or 5 a year. But it's vitally important that it does. And for example, Kuiper bought, I think, 89 launches. So, okay, these rockets are coming, there's going to be more availability in the market, but actually a lot of them are already booked out until 2030. So if you go and meet with some of the launch providers, they sort of say, yeah, we're launching our new rocket, it's great, we love it, but we've got nothing to sell to you because we pre-sold it all to Kuiper. And that's the same for Ariane 6, it's the same for ULA, same for New Glenn. So, yeah,
So
there's
it's
more
the same problem as going to Airbus. I can't get an airplane. I can't get a satellite launch. I'm screwed no matter what I'm doing in this industry. Is that what you're saying? Boeing also? To be fair here.
It's great there's new supply coming in the market. It's going to take quite a few years for it to become available to everyone.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, guys? Same?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a shortage which is for limited period of time, but as we all know, the development cycle is quite long and it's a tedious process. But at the same time, we also know that there are a lot of startups already in pipeline. Once they have their capability built and they're able to launch the satellites, I mean, there will be a massive amount of launch capacity available because these new satellite launchers are quicker to build and easy to kind of launch with very targeted capacity. So if we are talking about smaller satellites, lower Earth orbit, there will be many private industry players which will be able to launch satellites probably twice a week or at least, like once a week capacity. So we see there going to be like a lot more capacity available, but now it's kind of a temporary shortage that we are facing, geopolitical reason or longer development cycles.
Starship may change things.
Yeah.
Starship has the potential to really change things. I don't think it's going to change things in the next 2 to 3 years, but in the 4 to 5 year time frame it has into LEO has the potential to change the economics significantly. Whether SpaceX sell it cheap enough, if the marginal cost for them is just saying, okay, the alternative is this price and we're going to charge this much, I don't know what their business case will be, but it has the potential to LEO to really change the cost per kilogram.
Right. You say Starship, nothing's going to stop them now, right?
You're fired. I want to go back, and I'm sorry I'm jumped around a little here, but welcome to me. I want to go back to the sort of frequencies and types of satellites conversation that we were having a little bit ago. One of the other things that has come up of late, certainly in the personal device market, is direct-to-device from satellite, which is using standard communications waveforms, and we get lucky that the power can reach, which is cool. But part of what makes that work also is the sort of standardized protocols. We've got the 3GPP program that's working for this, and there's been some talk about extending 3GPP into the in-flight connectivity market. I've been skeptical of it in the past. My buddies are over there going to throw something at me later because I said that. But we've talked about it recently. I'm coming around, and I'm curious, do you see that or other similar types of changes within the existing frequency bands changing the way the market is going to evolve, or is it going to sort of stay proprietary waveforms or semi-proprietary waveforms slash kind of the SES model kind of thing? Where do we see that playing out over the next bit?
I can have a go.
I have no idea.
Or you're just going to put whatever radio on there you have to when the time comes.
In aviation, I think we're looking towards 5G at this point in time. So as far as how 3PP exists, I don't know. D2D is, I think, an interesting concept right now. I think there's a lot of good buzz around it. I think it's a very cool way to communicate. It helps connect a lot of people and allow them to communicate when they not necessarily would be able to. I think we have to be realistic about what can be accomplished and maybe not take with the expectations that we have potentially today for in-flight IFC and impose them on what's existing with direct-to-device.
I think 5G is a really important role to play. Direct-to-device is sort of somewhat adjacent to 5G. It's about potentially connecting one of these up. One of these is really hard. The link budget from this phone is really poor. To talk to a cell tower 1,000 times further away than the cell tower in the building here, the spectrum required to do that, the capex required to deliver space capability that can gain back the link performance that's degraded. So I think 5G core networks are, absolutely fundamental parts of telecommunication networks. D2D, not really so for aviation, because it's more about connecting personal devices, which are omnidirectional antennas, really poor devices, and trying to do that sort of job. And the beauty of that there'll no longer be a satellite phone, because everyone's Samsung and iPhone will become a satellite phone by default. And that's great. It opens a mass market up, and that's why people are getting excited about it. The physics, the spectrum, the commercials are all challenging for that. So 5G, yes. Direct-to-device in aviation, I'm on the fence about.
Alrighty. Last call for any questions from out there. Seeing none, and seeing that it is definitely beer o'clock or spritz o'clock, depending on which booth you are headed to next. Just walk the halls. There are plenty of happy hours available. Please join me in a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all for your time today.